Recording in progress.
All right, episode 122. I'm Dan.
And I'm Steven.
Basically, I'm Wiener, he's Schnitzel, and today we brought the secret sauce. We have Trevor Rabin joining us again, taking a bit of a deeper dive into your musical career, but of course, we definitely want to mention this. Let me pull up the beautiful graphic of your album that you also did the album cover for the 4 people that either missed that episode 10 episodes ago, number 112. Steve will pin that link in the comments, or just don't know about the album. How's that going? How's the reception been?
It's been amazing. I mean, I've yet to see something that, I've yet to hear of something that was extremely negative. I mean, I hear things like, God, why does he wear that crap? You know.
So in other words, Rick Wakeman has not listened to it yet.
What's that?
I said, so in other words, Rick Wakeman has not listened to it yet.
Oh,
I'm
exactly.
just kidding. No, that's great. Congratulations on this. It was a long time coming, and I know that a lot of people we talk to, not just fellow Yes fans, but fellow music fans and prog fans, and even of more mainstream commercial music. I hate that term, but we all know what it means.
Yeah. Yes.
Everybody seems to be really excited about it, so that's really good to hear.
No, it's great. It's been really. There's been no kind of downturns or negative things, which you always anticipate and wait for those, and they always happen. And you learn from people who have bad thoughts about it. So it's not a bad thing in some sense, but it's funny. I was watching a program yesterday about Copeland, Aaron Copeland, who's one of my absolute idols, and he was a very kind of he was a very kind and unassuming guy, and I read something that he said. I don't really look at any of the reviews. He said, and the only ones I read are the ones that are negative, because then you can learn something from it. So I'm just quoting him, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
It's an interesting element, because the one thing I've learned in my 60 whatever years of being on this planet is my wife and I have a blended family of 11 kids, Steve being the youngest, and 19 grandkids. And if there's one thing I've learned, you cannot please everybody with the same thing. And I think, something with subjective as anything related to art or food, music, there's just no way. And that should never be an artist's goal anyways. You got to do it for yourself first. And I'm sure that was your approach.
To be honest, I don't even know how I would do it to... listen, while doing film, there's certain parameters you ask. We want you to do something like this. And it's usually, it's a catch-22 before you've done a movie. They don't know what you're going to do. But luckily, I had some success in it. And so subsequent films, they would say, oh, what you did on Remember the Titans or Armageddon, we want something like that. And so you get the kind of genre they're looking at, but it's not as easy as just saying, oh, okay, then I'll just do that.
Right.
You don't get a hammer and a nail.
Yeah, and you still got to make it your own. And in that scenario, Trevor, do you get more direction from the director or from the musical director? Where does most of the direction come from regarding the feel of the music in different portions of the film?
A lot of it is down to personality. For example, when I'm doing I've done a number of Jerry Bruckheimer movies, who's the producer, and he has significant input into music and has some great ideas. So you take a lot of what he says and work kind of through that prism, so to speak. Unless sometimes there have been a couple of films where I've worked with Jerry and Michael Bay, who also has a pretty strong presence, and then he would have some input. And then, a lot of other things, it's the director and the producer's not involved, but it's usually the director and in Jerry's case, the producer.
Great. Thanks. I know Steve has a comment pulled up from one of our viewers, actually, that sent something in ahead of time.
So one of our viewers, Emmanuel, said, we've learned from other interviews that big mistakes, the first track on your album, Rio,
Yes.
which, yeah, it's a very nice physical copy. I love the bonus tracks on it as well. Um, so he says, we've learned from other interviews that Big Mistakes is about your nightlife experiences in the days of Rabbit. But I just can't shake the feeling that there's a lot of Chris Squire in there too. Those are some fishy bass melodies, and the outro sounds like a big generator slash talk tribute. Is that a deliberate tribute?
Um, I have to say no. I'd love to say yes, but no. It's just there's I have a love affair with my alembic bass, which I know it's not. A lot of people use the Fenders, and in Chris's case, the Rickenbacker, but that bass. Whenever I put it in my hands, it becomes a melodic machine. So I just love playing that bass, and I have heard that it's reminiscent of Chris. Not a bad sentence to be heard.
Right. Yeah. That's a beautiful instrument. I know that Greg Lake and John Paul Jones used it in the latter years of their careers with Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Led Zeppelin, respectively, of course, and just made that thing sing. It looks like it has a narrow neck. Does it feel the way it looks?
There's a problem with that guitar. It's got a long, thin neck, very long neck, and it's quite unbalanced. It's very heavy. So live, I would think it's a problem. But I sat for all the basses I was doing with that because I'm much more comfortable when it's on my lap. But I don't know if I was playing it live, whether I'd. And if I did a tour, I'd probably play some bass, and so I'd have to get used to it. But it's really unbalanced, It's
looks like it, yeah.
But man, it sounds great.
Absolutely. And Emmanuel also asked, he wanted to know about your involvement in the Manfred Mann album way back in 1980 on Chance, co-producing that album and playing some of the guitar on that, as well as later on 1972, somewhere in South Africa.
82.
82. What did I say?
72.
52. Were you asked to join the Earth Band, and was the keyboard solo on Toxic deliberate to reflect the Manfred Mann style as well?
Actually, no, the Toxic, there was a guy I used to work with. I used to do a lot of sessions with him. The guy's name's Henny Becker. He's actually in Canada right now. He's an absolutely brilliant musician. And I used to do sessions for him. And in fact, I used to play bass in his jazz band during Rabbit, which were two very different eras.
Yeah.
And he would do things like he'd play Bach two-part inventions and then do the whole thing. And then the band would come in. And he would put chords. There'd be the parts would, it was all written, but the chords would just be chords, and then if there's a dum dum da 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 dum, that would be written. So every now and then there'd be quite a lot of notes to play, but during the chords, there was some peculiar chords, and I'd say, and there'd be a bass solo, and Henny would say, "Okay, it's yours," and I'd go to him afterwards and say, "These chords are peculiar." I was tied into what I thought it was. And he started putting scales in brackets above the chords, and taught me it taught me so much about, I knew the modes and everything, but just how these things could relate, these weird scales, to what you would think was the wrong chord. But anyway, just talking a little bit about Henny, but no, Henny, I used to play keyboard. I mean, it's how I started, I played keyboards before I could walk, I think. But he really was a big influence on me regarding keyboards. But with Manfred, I love Manfred, and he was such a great guy to work with. I remember I did it during the punk period. And I'll never forget going into Manfred's studio early one day, and he was just sitting at the piano. He didn't know I'd come in. And I think, I can't remember what he was doing, but he was doing one of the more challenging Chopin nocturne thingies. And I said, my goodness, we should record that. He said, don't you ever tell anyone I can do this, because punk, if you could actually play, you're not cool, right?
Right. How funny.
That the general genre of what that meant. But he was a tremendous pianist, is a tremendous pianist. And no, that album, they didn't ask me to join the band. I just produced the album with him and played the guitar. But on Somewhere in Africa, I can't remember if that was before or later.
I think it was before.
It might have been before. He wanted a solo on a song called Redemption Song.
Mm.
And he put an African tinge to it. And it was the first time, the sound I use on Own of a Lonely Heart for the solo.
Yeah.
That's the sound I used years before with Manfred.
I was wondering about that, and I was going to ask you if that was the first time it was used, and if it was you that came up with it, or Trevor Horn, or how that came about. So that's really neat to learn. Was there Eventide harmonizers back then when you first, is that how you got the sound, or was it some other process?
I actually can't remember what I used on that one, but I'm sure it was probably the MXR.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a little MXR. And that was funny, you could have 4 set things, but if you moved it slightly, it would go off. So, but yeah, you just put a 5th on top, and that's, and then when it came to the solo for the solo for Somewhere in Africa, on that Redemption Song, Manfred said, I want you to do something out of this, just weird. And so I just stuck it on, and he loved it. And it was quite funny because I did a take before the second take, which is what they kept. And I played along, and Manfred said to the guy, he said, oh, that's fantastic. And the guy said, well, we were just getting sounds. And he's not screamed, but he was very cross. He said to the tape op, he said, when Trevor's playing, always record. I don't care if he's tuning up. I want to get everything. And
that's
I said,
a compliment.
Manfred, it really doesn't matter. But afterwards, he kept saying, well, I missed that first take. And I said, Manfred, the second one's okay. Come on.
That's great. Fast forward a few years, Trevor, had cinema remained cinema, and while it was cinema, was there any talk of moving forward with including any specific Yes songs or solo material in a live set? I guess at that point, the only solo material other than yourself would have been Chris's Fish Out of Water, Alan's Ramshackled. Was there any talk of including any assortment of things like that?
No, it was very free. When it came to, for example, my guitar solo, I just literally, before the show, I went through some chord things with Tony. I said, just play this behind me. And Solly's Beard I just played along with it. And then it kind of developed into having certain structure. So it was a very free kind of environment. I got to say one thing with Yes, maybe when I was not in the band this happened, but I can tell you that not once ever did we rehearse for a tour and finish rehearsing. We never played a show through. So I always used to say to everyone, those friends who would say, oh, I'm coming to Florida to see your show. I'd say, don't come to Florida, wait a couple of weeks so we can actually play the show at least once through.
And know the show. Did you like that edginess or that element of let's see, or did that drive you nuts?
I was always pushing to try and finish it, but it was either John's gone to a seance or Chris is late, or so it was always a bit of a mess. The two people who were always absolutely on time and perfect was Alan and Tony.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The other two were impossible.
That's funny. And I would hope Alan was on time, because that's a drummer's job, is to keep
yes,
time.
no,
Right?
he was always on time.
And speaking of that era, it was this month that 90125 celebrated 40 years. What's your perspective with that distance of time from that album and the tour and that hit and that whole creative process and really the rebirth of Yes? How does it feel, and what do you see when you look back?
Well, having gone through, obviously, a million recording sessions, doing session work, in the earlier years, and then doing a lot of production and then Rabbit, obviously, trying to create something new with Rabbit. It was pretty clear to me, from a technical standpoint, I knew about how to go into a studio and record. Although you learn all the time. I certainly knew nothing compared to what I know now, and I still know nothing. But but going in to do 90125, I knew it was going to be a very creative thing, and I just jealously wanted to hold on to areas of songs that I was very, very clear in my head about. And I was able to do that, and the focus just, it went on forever, but there were times where I remember my grandmother passed away, and we'd gone through a couple of bad days in the studio, and I was just really depressed. And at that point, I started writing the Leave It. I can feel no sense of measure.
Oh,
and
wow.
It was, and that's where that started. And then I got to the studio the next day. That was in my head, and Chris came up with a riff. Da, 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 da.
Wow.
That's a great riff. And then, as we've probably spoken about, we couldn't get a great drum sound, so we decided just do it a cappella, and we started it a cappella.
Yeah. Did you ever imagine there'd
weird things happened?
Yeah. Did you ever imagine there'd be 44 versions or whatever of that song?
The music video.
The video?
Yeah, and a couple other versions. I've heard the all a cappella. I've heard the whole electronic version. I've heard like maybe 4 versions, not 44.
Well, I will say, with all due respect, any other version other than the a cappella, which was pretty much intended initially, but to somehow include everything, and then the record version, those are the two I like. Any electronic versions, I think, are absolutely not necessary, should never have been recorded.
Yeah. Yeah, the one I'm thinking of, I think, is in the credits of Yes Years, is it?
No, in 9012 Live.
Oh, okay. Great.
Oh, the beginning part. Yes.
Right. Interesting. Great. Steve?
Yeah. What was the inspiration behind adding a bit of Make It Easy as the intro to Owner of Lonely Heart in the concerts? And did you ever consider playing that whole song or the earlier version, Don't Give In, live?
That was actually one of the better songs that when we were rehearsing at cinema, we always, whenever we got to rehearsal, when Chris finally turned up, we would play that usually first, because it always sounded so great live, But yeah, I think we just decided once, Owner had become what it became on record, that that would be a great way to start that thing. And we really enjoyed playing that intro, the cinema intro. So it just stuck to, just kind of butted up itself against the beginning of the song.
Is there a chance we'll hear that whole song if you tour your current new album?
That's a really good question, because I haven't listened to that for a long, long time, but I did listen to the the demo of it, and I thought, wow, there was really something to this. And I would do the guitar solos would be different, and the sounds would be different. I mean, it was very late 70s kind of suffering from cheap keyboards that you try and make sound good.
Right.
Yeah. On 90124, the demo, the collection of your demos, Don't Give In, the earlier version of Make It Easy is listed as Cinema Demo. Was that a mistitle, or was Make It Easy ever considered to be part of the longer version of Cinema called Time?
Well, I'd written a song with Rabbit called Take It Easy. So I thought, Make It Easy. It's just, how many easies am I going to do? And I just thought, no, let's call it something else. And then the band was Cinema. So I think Chris and I just decided, let's just, as far as identification purposes, let's just call this Cinema. And then Don't Give In was, I guess, stuck in the brackets. something to that effect.
Okay.
Cool. Also moving ahead in time a little bit, can you talk about that time that Jimmy Page performed with you guys? I'm Down, and we've both seen you mention that it was a dangerous situation. Can you add a little clarity or context to that?
It was so great because I think he was in London, and
I believe it was.
Yeah, and he came into town, and he got up and we played, and I think it was a long version, and none of us were particularly good on it. It was a little rough, but
Yeah, it might have been in Dortmund, I think.
Dortmund, yes, it
Oh,
was in Dortmund, Germany, yeah, and it was a lot of fun, and I loved Jimmy, and he was such a sweet person, and but then Chris, me, and Jimmy decided to go out on the town in Dortmund. And I remember something to the effect of, look, it's 3 a.m. We've got a 10 o'clock play, and I'm paraphrasing all of this, trying to remember it. And I remember saying to Jimmy, yeah, I'm going to go to bed, I've got to get up at 10. And he said, well, just see it through and go to bed tomorrow night.
I love it because he was not exactly a young man at that point.
No.
He had to be what, in his mid to late 40s at least, right?
At least, yeah.
Yeah. Funny. Thanks for sharing that.
It was fun, but it was also peculiar hearing John doing I'm Down and us playing it, and just really just having fun with it.
Yeah.
Didn't matter.
Just see it through.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I actually see a comment from Doug Curran asking, "What are your memories of playing and singing on the Bonham album in 1989?"
Oh,
I think this would have been Jason Bonham.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Duncan.
I love that album, and I love all that wall of backing vocals that you did. It just fits so well. How did that come about? What was that like?
That was amazing because I was just finishing my album on. Can't Look Away album, which Bob Ezrin had been producer.
Yeah.
And Bob was doing the Bonham album. He was producing that after he did my album, and he said he just called me and he said, "Have you gotten any time?" I said, "Well, we're not touring for a while, but what do you need?" And he said, "We'd love you to play bass on the Bonham album." And it was Jason asked. And Bob recommended. So Bob said it was, I recommended you for it. And when I see Jason, he said, "No, I asked for you." Uncle Trev, it's quite funny because I look at him as a contemporary, not the Led Zeppelin guys as contemporaries, but he slots me in with Chris and all the guys and the Led Zeppelin guys as the father figures. So, but anyway, he asked me to do it, and I thought it was a really well done album, and it was really real. And Jason's a great drummer. And I actually got Duncan Forer from the Rabbit Band, who had a great voice, and our voices blended really well. So we together did the backing vocals on that, and then I just played my lembic.
Yeah, it's great. I love that album. I wish he would go back to having that band. No offense to what he's doing now. The Led Zeppelin experience is wonderful. I've seen it in a small venue relatively, but that album, every song is a great musical composition. It's not, I think when that came out, Trevor, a lot of people expected something not as complex. There's a lot of complex composition in that. And it's wonderfully produced, and your vocals really did add a lot to it. So I wish he'd go back to doing that. Yeah.
Thank you. And, Jason really is not just a drummer. He has some real musical instincts.
Yeah.
He's really a really good and a good player, obviously.
Great.
Yeah. I remember in early 2008, there was a post on your website saying that Yes Management had been contacting you to see it'd be free to join them on the 40th anniversary tour, which at the time would have included John Anderson alongside Howe, Squire, White, and Oliver Wakeman. Were they hoping that you'd play throughout the entire show alongside Steve Howe, or only for select songs? What would the structure of what idea do they have?
Is that this? I remember getting up and just I think that show Peter Frampton opened for them, I think, and
that was later, I think in 2010. But I think they asked you again later. I imagine it might have been Chris who called you up for that occasion in 2010.
Chris, Chris used to always call me up and say, "When are you going to stop with your desk job?"
Meaning the film score stuff.
Yeah, that's Chris's way. I said, Chris, it's a pretty enjoyable desk job. But I do remember getting up at the Greek in LA and just playing Owner with them. And the singer was not the singer that's not John Davis.
Yeah, it was Benoit David.
Yes.
Yeah. The Canadian chap.
Yeah. One song.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. So for the 40th, a couple years before that, were they hoping you'd guess for a song or multiple songs? I'm not sure if it was too long ago or what, but just curious.
Well, I'm paraphrasing, but I vaguely remember when Chris called and did his usual kind of somewhat flippant, as he always did. I do remember saying, no, well, first of all, I thought, well, I haven't played on stage for a while. It's probably not a great idea. And then he kept doing his usual Chris thing. And I said, well, let me just come up and do Owner. It's probably the best idea.
Okay.
So no, I didn't want to play more than that.
Cool.
Right.
Were there any songs, Trevor, considered for ARW that didn't make the set list?
I really wanted to do Endless Dream.
Oh, that would have been
Love
great.
that song.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love playing that live. I think the Talk Band with Tony, Chris Allen, and John. I think it was a good. The band was playing well then, and I thought this band could do a good job of it, but we just never got around to it.
Interesting.
Right. And
when we did Endless Dream, I used to play piano for the first
in the
part
beginning,
of the song. And I would have insisted Rick played, so that I could sing without looking like a Billy Joel clone.
Yeah, I saw that show at the Greek. That was a great show. That, in fact, I remember that was the first show. Do you remember, Trevor, when they experimented with the people in the audience were able to tune in to a closed circuit broadcast and listen?
Oh yeah, Concertsonics, I think.
Yeah, and I thought that was the worst idea, because if I'm at a show, I want the blowback from the stage. I don't want to put in some broadcasted. That's just my personal thing.
No, and it was kind of my fault, because I suggested we do it in quad, because there was really no some
in the arena,
immersive sound. But when you're live, it doesn't really matter. Immersive is immersive. The whole place is immersive.
Yeah.
So it's a real literal reading of the whole room. Your ears are. But I just thought, because the very front rows are going to hear, especially if they're sitting in front of Chris, that's all they're going to hear. You have to move back to get a perspective of what the mixer's actually doing. So I just thought, with headphones, tuning into a proper mix of it done at the board would be a good idea. But yeah, it was a great idea that didn't come off completely as expected. There were a couple of nights that worked, though.
That's great, because you did that along the whole tour.
Right.
Okay.
And it was a real pain in the butt I think we provided headphones for the front rows or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Had to bring their own.
Almost like the old airplane headphones they'd hand out, right?
Yes. Yeah, so how could that be good? Yeah.
And I'll have the chicken.
Right.
Yeah, one of our viewers who goes by the username MP was wondering whether there's any chance that the songs that did not end up on the ARW Live at Apollo release could end up on something else in the future. Songs that weren't on there include South Side of the Sky and I'm Waiting. So any chance of those coming out, or is that up to others to decide?
You know, I've forgotten about that. Yeah, we didn't do the whole show on that. That was, you know, the songs were selected for the show, not the whole show, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, boy, I wouldn't even know where that's got to be somewhere. Actually, that's a great question. I should ask Paul if we have the whole. I'm sure we have the whole show, and
I would hope it's somewhere.
No, it's I have it. I'm sure I have it because we mixed it here at my studio, so I'm sure it's here. But would have to. I'm speaking to Paul, my guy, soon, and I'll ask him. We must have it. Be interesting to put it up and have a listen.
That's
yeah,
cool.
I'm sure people would love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think last time we spoke, we brought up Miracle of Life and what a great song we think that is. And if I ever feel cheated by Yes of one thing, it's that song wasn't performed on the Union tour. It's just such a great song. I would love to hear that live.
That was the most important song for me on the album. Lift Me Up, obviously, I think was useful, and we did what we did with it, and I loved playing it. But Miracle of Life was one I really wanted to do, and it just never got together. You know, it's like the old story of the whale. You know, with Yes, you know, it's wonderful when it's on the beach. It's impossible to move when it's on the beach, but if you can get it into the ocean, it really swims well.
Such a great song. And you mentioned Lift Me Up. I think, Steve, do you remember a couple days ago, I was shopping at the grocery store and I heard Lift Me Up. Like, I heard something.
You told me about that.
Like, what is that? Like, I couldn't quite hear it through the ambient noise. And then I as I walked down an aisle, there was a speaker right above me and it was the chorus to Lift Me Up. I'm like, oh, cool. What is your perspective on that? Like, you know, I know that depending on what music package any given retail store has dialed in or restaurant, you can hear all kinds, like I hear Pink Floyd and all kinds of crazy stuff now in the grocery store. Whereas 15, 25 years ago, you only heard really old stuff or elevator type music. Whereas now you can hear some great music. What's your thoughts on that?
That's the first time I've ever heard Lift Me Up has been played at the supermarket, so to speak. Yeah, no, that's wild. But, you know, what was always rewarding for me is the sound of it happened 2 times or 3 times really well for me. Leave It, this chorus of Shoot High Aim Low and the chorus of Lift Me Up, the combination of Chris, John, and myself, I thought the voices sound pretty. It had its own thing, you know.
Yeah.
The sum was. What is the saying? Sum's more than the parts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So take a detour into films. How did you get involved with that Christmas movie, Jack Frost? You know, you had a little cameo in there and also contributed music to that. So how did that happen?
Yeah, it was a strange thing. I mean, we were all getting on really well, the director, editor, and everyone. And it was pretty much an orchestral score, the whole thing, with a couple of kind of rocky elements, but mostly just orchestral and a real orchestra. It was all very real. There was not a lot of synth hangover. But, and the director just said, you know, it's a band, Jack Frost, and we should make it a band. So we got Lily Hayden, I think it was, and Lou Molino, obviously, and the bass player in the show was actually the actor, and so we became the band, and it was very few times that we were utilized. Anything I said landed on the floor because I'm the worst actor in the world. So that didn't work. But it was really an interesting thing because I had to teach Michael Keaton to sing.
What was that
or
like?
or coach him how to sing, because he wasn't a singer.
Yeah.
And we went into the studio. I wrote some songs, and it's on the movie, in the movie, and he turned out he was able to do it.
Did he pick it up pretty easily? Or was he throwing stuff, getting frustrated? Or were you?
It
Sorry.
was frustrating. It was tough going, but then it was much easier than it would have been for Michael to teach me how to act.
Ah, interesting.
Do you remember any of the lines by any chance?
No, because I think that I didn't. Did I say anything? No, I think there's one point where Lou says something, and I think that might have been. It's so long ago, I can't remember the movie.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
Yeah. On Jacaranda, on Jacaranda,
Yes.
Rescue is a favorite track of mine. What inspired you to repurpose that from the Guardian soundtrack?
I was just so happy with how that turned out. And, when I asked Liz to do it, I'd worked with her before, but I just didn't know that her voice was an instrument, and just captured me. I mean, she sang it. And when she came to do the video, she looks great in the video. And it's, and I added a different beginning and a different ending to it. And yeah, I was really excited about that track.
That's
nice.
Great.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. What films that you did not score or contribute to do you love watching for the watching for the great matchup of the scores? I think Dad added that part, but yeah.
I tell you what I really like listening to, because it's all in mono. There's no tricks, there's no synths. It's all real players. Old 50s cowboy movies, even stuff, Gunsmoke. You listen to some of the scores on Gunsmoke, and it's, oh my God. And these guys would do it in seconds. I don't know if you know this, but Appalachian Spring by Copeland was Martha. He wanted to do a ballet, and I think it was for Martha Graham. And that unbelievable piece of music, he had 5 weeks to write it.
Wow. That's crazy.
And to me, that's just ridiculous. You know, how someone could come up with something
of that scope. Yeah. Crazy. The music of that time also very emotive, so considering the scope of the composition and, what it evoked and just the matchup with what you're watching, just tremendous composers back then. Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not sure if the story I'm going to give you is correct or not accurate or completely wrong, but I've heard it said a number of times. Stravinsky, who's also one of my favorite composers, well, there's so many of them, but I can't remember who the guy was, but a director asked him to do a film. I don't know if you've heard the story, but
I don't know if I have. No.
He said, well, he asked for the most outrageous amount of money, and for those days, it would even be a lot these days, or some time ago. It's all gone downhill.
Yeah.
But he also said, I need 2 years. And movies I've done, it's like you have 10 weeks, and there's no leeway. Yeah. It's not like making a record where you can say, I need to go and just walk along, have a walk and think about it.
Sit on a rock and have a meditate about it.
Yeah, for a couple of weeks. I might go to Hawaii or something. With film, it's like you keep up or you die.
Yeah, interesting. 2 years.
Yeah, and he asked for 2 years. Obviously, he didn't do it. I think he did do something, but Copeland was unbelievable. And Shostakovich, I mean, I think it was Shostakovich who wrote T for Two.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you come up with your Fifth Symphony and write that?
And then that, yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned how the pay is kind of going downhill. I saved this photo that I saw online today.
Oh my God, what is that? Hang on, don't move. Put it back.
Yeah, it's a screenshot from Back to the Future of Doc and Marty. Like Doc is in the DeLorean, and the caption says, "I just got back from 2050. Local musicians are still making $100 a gig."
Ah, oh, that's fantastic.
I sent this to our son Kavan, who's a performer in Las Vegas, and he wrote back, "True." And I wrote back, "Well, I hope not, but we'll see." He's actually a singer. He plays Morris Day in the Purple Rain show, the tribute to Prince in Vegas.
Wow.
Yeah, he's
That's
really,
a hell of a gig.
yeah, it is. We're really proud of him. He does a really great job. Yeah.
That's amazing. Oh, congratulations on that.
Yeah, thanks. You mentioned earlier that you played piano and keyboards before you were able to walk. So now we know what your first instrument was.
Yes.
What instruments, I think I know most of them, but tell everybody, what instruments do you play and in what order did you learn them and what inspired you? Was it your parents basically sitting you at the keys and this is what you do, this is what you learned growing up? Or how did it first come about and in what order did you learn which instruments?
I have a a brother who's 3 years older than me, and he was licentiate. I mean, a very, very good violinist. I mean, he played Havanaise by Vivaldi as well as I've ever heard it. Wow. When he was like 16 years old. He was like a prodigy. And then me, 3 years younger, was thrown into the piano. I couldn't play the violin. I tried. I didn't like it. I couldn't play it. And I love it as an instrument. And my sister, who's 8 years younger than me, also plays piano beautifully. And it was a very traditional. In fact, you know, when I started doing scores here, and I'd be talking to the orchestra, and I'd say, "Okay, bar 7, we need to speed up those semiquavers. There needs to be a slight crescendo there before we get to the minims." And they'd look at me, "What are you talking about?" Because I grew up with such a traditional kind of background. So to me, you know, it was breves, semi-breves, minims.
So the vernacular was different.
Yeah, and it took a while for me to get used to 16 notes, 30-second notes. I was like, "Oh, okay." I mean, you could do it, but
yeah,
you know, it was just a different thing. And the minute I come back home, I'm back to the old bad habits or the right habits.
Right. How funny. And growing up in South Africa, leading up to Rabbit and maybe even with Rabbit, what was the music scene like there during those earlier decades?
Well, this is one of the reasons I was so very proud of what Rabbit was, because it was really the first band to do original, serious rock music. And the first album we did, I mean, there's a big hit on there, a song called Charlie, which was a ballad which I wrote, and Patrick Van Blerk did the lyrics. And outside of that, though, and there's some kind of poppy songs, but there's a lot of the album which is very kind of, it's almost proggy, I guess. But in that environment, it was close to impossible to get a record company to even consider doing that. But I was lucky, you know, I'd been doing a lot of sessions and a lot of productions. So I had a kind of, not terribly strong, but I did have an influence about, I really would like to record this band. And so I had a voice in it. And our bass player, Ronnie Robot, was he was very into pushing the band forward, and he also helped with that. But it was, most bands would do top 40 things and play at a restaurant or at a club, but we decided we didn't want to do that. And I was absolutely, you know, I was doing sessions all day, doing pop music and country music and films and all kinds of stuff. But at night I wanted to go and play, you know, rock and roll and much more obscure stuff. And we landed up playing at really seedy joints, because there you could play this stuff and the audience would appreciate it. In between gunfights and knives and fights, it's kind of seedy places. We played at this place called Take It Easy, and we took over from a band who had been very popular, and everyone thought, "Oh, no one's going to be able to take over from whatever their name was." and we were there for 9 months, and that's when the band broke out.
Oh,
and
wow.
we did original music, but the cover things we did were, we did some weird stuff, I'm Butterfly, and very, very obscure stuff. So we always did what we wanted to do, and I think that's why the band broke, because while it was, the band probably sold more pictures than records, because it was, it's a teeny bopper looking band.
Right.
It was very serious band, and the band were very good. And it's unfortunate that, because had the market been different, there might have been other bands who also wanted to do stuff. It's just, I think as a band, we had the courage to say, we're not going to do it any other way. We want to do our stuff. It's our music, and that's how a band should be. And it was unheard of in South Africa.
Yeah, that's neat. And we know you play drums. We've seen you play drums in videos. Did you ever utilize that skill to show drummers the part you had in mind for a particular song? Did you ever play drums as a session player at all? And at what age did you first start learning properly how to play drums?
I just kind of picked it up. My brother was the drummer in the band. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, my first thing of playing bass was, we played, and this is when I think I was 13 or 14. I was playing guitar, and my brother was the drummer and the leader of the band. When my solos went on too long, I'd get a drumstick in the back, he was the leader. And there was one song we did, I'm sure you know it, My Generation, the Who song.
Of course, yeah.
Classic.
And the bass player couldn't do the solo, and I could play the solo exactly like the record. So I played bass on that song. I think that was the beginning of me enjoying playing bass.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. What a great study. The great John Entwistle. He just
he's one of Chris's favorites.
Yeah. And Geddy Lee as well. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they did an album called what was it called?
Yeah, it's
Retro.
It's on the tip of my tongue.
Throwback, or it came out after.
Yeah, I'm blanking on it, but I'm looking it up.
It's all cover too.
Feedback.
Yeah, and there's at least a couple Who songs on there. There's Crossroads by Cream. It's all covers of stuff that they grew up listening to and playing in cover. It's a wonderful album. It's basically an EP, if I remember correctly. There's like five songs on it, something like that. I need to pull that out. And I pictured them recording it with tie-dye carpets and lava lamps, like going back in time just to set the vibe. You construct your own scene in your head. But it's a really neat album. It's worth listening to.
That's interesting. Yeah. And who's all on it?
Who's on it? So it's Geddy, Alex, and Neil.
Oh, so it's just Rush doing all these things.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's two songs they did live that are on the R30 DVD and CD, if I remember, that's where they are. And it's Crossroads by Cream and the Who song Summertime Blues. They played that as well. And it's in the video and it's on the CD. Really great job of that stuff. You could tell that they're playing music that they loved and grew up with, which is neat, I think. Yeah. Cool. Well, Trevor.
No, I did.
Yeah,
I once did there was a, Steve Vai had called me and asked me if I would, he's doing a question answer thing with guitar students for the Grammy organization. He'd want me to do it. So I did it, and there were, it was Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, myself, Steve Lukather, Stanley Jordan, and oh my God, what's his name? The guy does the rap stuff on the guitar. God,
I don't know if I know his name, but I know who you mean.
It's an amazing guy, a lovely guy too. And so we were backstage, and then we came on stage, and it was a very quick thing, and we were going to do question answers and then play. And I think it was Lukather who said, what are we going to do? Oh, let's do Crossroads. Now, every guitarist who's, plays would know the solo of Crossroads.
Right.
Sleep, right? So Steve's idea was, let's do it like faster. And it was unbelievable. It started, it was like, and it goes, dun, 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 and we dun, 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 dun.
Oh, wow. So the solo comes around.
And everyone knew the solo, and everyone played the solo exactly perfectly at double the speed. It was a peculiar thing. I know it's recorded somewhere. We did a lot of stuff.
Ask, yeah.
I haven't heard it since then.
Interesting. Steve has 2 quick questions from the fans. Oh, and Doug Curran is correcting us that Africa was 82, going back to that.
Wow.
Yeah, that's ancient in modern times now. Steve's going to relay a couple questions from the fans, and then I have one last question for you.
Yeah,
sure.
So,
okay, thanks.
So Doug brought something to our attention. Was there a show on your Can't Look Away tour that was professionally filmed? And if so, could that be in a vault somewhere? Could it ever be released? What's the story there?
I'm so sad, in retrospect, obviously, that wasn't done. I wish, and my manager I was with at the time, Tony D, who was Tony Dimitriadis, who was Yes's manager, and Tom Petty and Billy Idol and the whole lot of. I never had a contract with him. There was no contract. It was just handshake. And a tremendous relationship. Nothing ever got in the way. And even when we split up, because I went into film and didn't feel the need for a manager and an agent, we're still on great terms. And he's a very close friend. He's writing a book right now, which I've warned him, just be careful what you say.
Nice.
But he was a great guy, and he was very forward looking, and I guess I should have thought of that, because I think that would have been, I would cherish that if I had one of the good shows we did, because there are a couple of great shows. I wish we would have filmed the Roxy, because all there is a record of it,
Yeah.
So I'm sorry there's no footage.
And no broadcast on any foreign TV channel or something that there might be a record of or something?
There was one show, I think it was in Boston, that was recorded. I think it was Boston, that was recorded live onto radio. So the mix is really not very good, but that's the only other one I know. And then there's a couple of, on YouTube, there's a couple of San Diego and stuff, but nothing with footage. Just
was there one more, Steve?
Yeah, and this is from, I think this is Joe Cass from Total Macertain asking, if you tour Rio, is there any particular song that you'd be most excited to play live?
Well, Push is quite a challenging one, which I love playing. Push, and then straight after Push, maybe Tears, because then I can have a break for my damn right hand.
Yeah, nice. Last question. I remember I saw the Union tour twice. I saw it in the round at the LA Forum, and I saw it on an outdoor stage in Orange County somewhere. At the LA show, I remember very vividly, while John was making an announcement, Rick snuck up behind you and draped you with an American flag because you officially became a U.S. citizen that day. Do you remember that?
I remember it so well, and I did an unforgivable thing. Once I put it around and gave Rick a smooch or whatever.
Yeah.
I put it on my stool, because where do I put it? And I put it on the stool and I sat on it. And you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
And I would never have done it otherwise. But it was a great moment. I'd been to the federal building to be inducted into the Hall of America.
Right. I did that with Steve's mother when we got married, actually. She's from Mexico. So I've from Guanajuato, the interior of Mexico. So I've been through the process, and it must be immensely rewarding. So all these years forward, is being a U.S. citizen all cracked up you thought it would be, or are you ready to give a volunteer revocation? Like, what's the status?
I'm 100%, 100% American. I feel American. I'm very proud to be American.
That's awesome.
I've never had a
Trevor
to go back and live in South Africa.
Yeah, and you've traveled you're from South Africa. You've traveled all over the world. Would you agree that most Americans, especially those who don't get out and see the world, really don't understand how good we have it here as far as liberties? And I'm not trying to turn this into a political conversation. This is more of a social, cultural conversation, I think, because my wife and I have traveled to different countries, and we appreciate what we have here. You know, we don't take it for granted. I think a lot of people do. But what's your perspective on that, having seen the world and others?
Well, this is another conversation that I would slot in 2-3 hours for, right? And then we could really chat.
Yeah.
But no, I love this place, and it is frustrating to me to see complaints when in other areas and other places you don't have the luxury of even complaining in that way.
Right. The irony in that, yeah.
Right. And I also find when like what's his name? The guy who's been, they want to expel him, George.
From Congress or?
Congressman.
Oh, yeah. I can't think of his name right now either. Check my phone real quick, see if it's headline
Is it
news.
Garcia?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, in lesser countries, you would never even have heard about that. The great thing here is, oh, look at the trouble we all have. No, the good news is a lot of it gets found out. I mean, I know it, I'm sure a lot doesn't, but a hell of a lot more gets found out here than other places. And people think, oh, this place is screwed. No, this is why it's good.
Yeah.
No, I love from the minute I arrived here, because I lived in London for 3 years before being here. And I loved London and loved living in London. But once I got here, it immediately felt like home.
Interesting.
Yeah, it just felt so natural. And it took me years to get through all the different, the A1s, the A2, 3, whatever they were.
Yeah.
This permit, that permit, green card to be South Africa finally.
Right.
And, you know, a lawyer to show that you employ people and you're not going to be a burden. So I went through all this stuff, and it was a very exciting day that day. And that show was one of the most special days. And halfway through the show, I thought, shit, I'm American now. It was an amazing feeling.
That's neat. That's really neat. Trevor, thank you so much for taking time with us again to take a deeper dive into your career and life as a musician and a human. We'd love to do it again sometime. And folks, thank you so much for following what we do. You could follow us at youtube.com/@Yesshift, anchor.fm/Yesshift, on Facebook at facebook.com/Yesshift. And did I miss anything, Steve?
Yeah, also follow Drum Talk TV, talk about drums, drummers, and drumming, so it's at Drum Talk TV pretty much everywhere. So yeah.
Yeah, we're up to 1.3 million fans, reaching 100 million people a year, which blows my mind. I don't know what's wrong with all these people, but thanks for following what we do. And we got some special things coming up with the membership site, so check that out. And if you want to drop Steve and I a note, you could write us through the Facebook page, or you can write yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com, and we will see you all very soon. Trevor, hang on with us for just a moment, okay?
All right. I do want to say you guys are incredible, and I'm delighted to be doing this again.
Thank you so much. That means so much to us. Thank you. Awesome. Thanks, folks. We'll see you soon.
Bye.